Biden is losing to Trump. Should we be freaked out right now?
I mean, so there's New York Times polls that came out last week. The 6 states we think will decide the election in 2024. And yeah, they had Trump ahead in 5 of those 6 states. They're all states that Trump had lost in 2020. So the thing that's interesting to me is if you look back at the 2020 election from this point, fall of 2019 on to election day, there was literally not a single poll that ever had Trump ahead of Biden nationally. We've now had multiple polls that show Trump ahead of Biden. Really? So there is a different atmosphere around this looming, and Trump is showing a strength, or Biden is showing a weakness that wasn't there the last time in the run-up to the election. So I would take it very seriously, yeah.
All right, folks. So today, Donald Trump sat down for an interview with Logan Paul, which is pretty hilarious, and we might have to talk about that tomorrow. But today, I want to discuss the state of the 2024 election and specifically polling out of Pennsylvania. And I know that is so much more boring than talking about Logan, but this is important. Why? Because the general consensus, the almost universal consensus, is that Pennsylvania will be the one to decide the election. Whoever wins PA will win the entire thing.
The Eagles are so much better than the Eagles.
Now, that is not mathematically technically true. Donald Trump still does have a path to victory without PA, and hypothetically, Joe Biden does as well, although it doesn't seem all that realistic. But still, I understand the point. In many ways, Pennsylvania is the modern bellwether state of American politics these days, and it's worth 19 electoral votes. If you can crack that one, you keep Trump's lead in the Sun Belt. You already have 270 votes, and so obviously this is a state that's very important. With that said, I want to react to some data today that actually shows Donald Trump's lead in PA increasing, which is obviously bad news for Joe Biden there, as well as some data on Biden's overall approval rating that almost spells certain doom in regards to history and how that impacts incumbent presidents in their reelection bid. But first, let's start here with the Pennsylvania data. We got a poll today out of NPR, which is historically sort of a more left-leaning pro-Biden poll, which shows here Donald Trump leading Joe Biden 47-45, a margin of 2 points in the state of Pennsylvania. And check out some of the details here. Among independent voters, right? This is the concern, was that after the hush money trial, after the verdict, independents might start to turn on Trump. Well, in the state of PA, which we've again established might be the one that decides the election, still winning with independent voters. And then check this out, among voters who say they are definitely voting, and so this is an indication of where the energy is maybe for the presidential election at least, Trump leads there 48-46. And so what I think that shows is there are a lot of maybe people who don't like Donald Trump, but really are not enthusiastic about Joe Biden either. And so they're not super inclined to really care to be voting in this election. Whereas in regards to the Trump voters, a lot of them are enthusiastic. A lot of them are fired up against Biden. And so that's certainly good news. And again, this is a more left-leaning poll. But when we overall look at the RCP average, right, this is an aggregate of most of the reputably known polls out there. You see here, Donald Trump currently leads in RCP. Again, this is an average of multiple polls. We're not just taking one outlier here, of a spread by 2.3. And when you look at all of the recent polls from April to May, etc., Donald Trump has been leading in virtually, actually, exactly all of them. There's not a single poll that Joe Biden is leading in. And you take a look here at this chart, Joe Biden has not led in the RCP average for almost 2 months now, right? Last time was around April 24th, 2024. Since then, Trump's been leading in all of them. But take a look here, folks. This might be what's most important of it all. Take a look at that trend line there, folks. As you can see, Biden continues to drop, and Donald Trump's margin is on the verge of starting to increase. We'll have to see how the verdict and the fallout of all of that continues to affect these polls. But again, that is very good news out of the state of Pennsylvania, the state we are once again saying may be the one that decides it all. And let's look through some of the details of that Pennsylvania poll, because they also asked these same voters a few secondary questions, and questions I think history says usually decide whether or not an incumbent president, Joe Biden Biden obviously wins re-election, but maybe even more true here because Donald Trump in his own way, he's not an incumbent president, but he's also a prior president. And so people have two bodies of work to go on. Check out what they found in this poll. They asked, were you and your family better off during Trump's presidency or Biden's presidency? 53% said Trump, 44% said Biden. I don't know who those 44% are. Frankly, they're pretty delusional, but still on that metric, which again is a big thing that decides an election involving an incumbent president historically. Donald Trump there leads by 9 points. And was the country better off during Trump's presidency or Biden's presidency? 52% said Trump. 46% only said Joe Biden. Not good news for Joe Biden's re-election hopes. But here might be some even worse news. Joe Biden just hit an all-time low in his approval rating, and that approval rating now is somewhere around 37%. It is very difficult. In fact, I'm not even sure it's ever been done to be winning any type of re-election for your presidency as an incumbent with an approval rating of 37%. But still, even worse than that, we are about less than 5 months now away from the election? You do not want to be hitting your all-time lowest historic approval rating right before the election, right? Maybe take it, in the midterm year or something, or an off year, not your election year, not 5 months before it. And take a listen here to some of that reporting about Joe Biden's approval rating from Fox News.
Some politics, polling guru Nate Silver proposing President Biden reconsider his 2024 plans. He posted this: Biden just hit a new all-time low in approval, 37.4% at 5:38 yesterday. Dropping out would be a big risk, but there's some threshold below which continuing to run is a bigger risk. Are we there yet? I don't know, but it's more than fair to ask. Some arguing that Biden's behavior in public is raising concerns over his age, including this incident last night where he does appear to freeze. Watch. So you can see it there.
Yeah, so just to be clear, a president's approval rating has historically been the most important factor that so just to be clear, historically speaking, a president's approval rating has been the number one factor that decides whether or not they win re-election. And so again, not just a number, 37%, which is very bad in itself, but to be hitting your historic all-time low approval rating on election year, that's the worst situation you could possibly ask for. And by the way, in regards to this last clip here, as well as talking about what Nate Silver said there in the beginning, by the way, Nate Silver is an analyst who is very Democrat leaning, so not exactly a guy who's on our side, but still, I think that also proves another important point, which is, okay, so it's June 2024. Joe Biden's approval rating is at an all-time low, but maybe with talent, with good messaging, with really being sharp and on point, he can pull out of it. Next thing you know, by election day, he has a historic high approval rating, or at least a better one than he did before. The issue, though, is that when you look at the current state of Joe Biden, it is getting objectively a whole lot worse. And I've been pointing this out over the past week or so. You look at what happened at D-Day, where he allegedly poops his pants. He walks off mysteriously of the ceremony early and leaves the World War II veterans hanging. And then you saw that video of him blankly staring around at the Secret Service car, like literally looking like a grandpa with dementia. I mean, I know we always make those jokes, but that seemed pretty clear. And then this moment right here where he blanked out, he also blanked out meeting Hunter Biden. I think it's obvious that yes, Joe Biden has shown signs of dementia for a while now, but it is getting a lot worse. It's arguably the worst it's ever been. And so I look look at election year. Historically, what we kind of saw in 2020 was Biden was all over the place, but by his standards, he somewhat pulled it together at the moments that counted, right? The presidential debates, they probably pumped him up with Adderall or whatever, but he was kind of there. He was more sharp than usual. I don't know if it's adrenaline or whatever. I mean, when I give speeches, I sometimes get the same way. It's like you perform better under the pressure, but you look at the state of Joe Biden now, it's much worse than it was in 2020, even worse than it was last year. Is Biden even going to have the energy or the mental awareness, the existence to pull out of the current hole that he's in? I don't necessarily think that's true. And so I think this is, big proof that Joe Biden might just seriously be doomed. And for the past year, we've seen everything he does to try to improve his approval rating just doesn't work. I don't see what they could invent in the next 5 months. If throwing Donald Trump in jail wasn't enough to do it, what could they do that possibly will help out Joe Biden? But with all of that in mind, keeping in mind everything I just said, do not use that as an excuse to get complacent. Okay. That is the worst thing that can happen to us. A couple months out from the election, things are looking good. Things are trending up. Instead of using that to work 10 times harder, it makes us lazy. Don't let that happen, because still, regardless of everything we keep talking about, it is an objective fact that this election is very close. We just talked about Trump leading by 2 in Pennsylvania. Number one, that is within the margin of error. And number two, that can change between now and election day. Okay. So do not take these polls that I'm showing you to try to give you a morale boost as confusion to say, it's okay to get lazy with it. Also, Decision Desk released their polling average update of the 2024 national race that shows this is an average based on 740 polls, and it shows Donald Trump leading Joe Biden by exactly 1 point. And so there's 2 ways to look at that. You can say, look, Trump is leading Biden by 1 nationally. That's a good thing. The other way to look at it, though, is we're only leading by 1 point. We can't really trust polls 100%. That is no reason to be vehemently believing that, hey, it's okay to walk away with this election right now. And this is also an important point that Charlie Kirk brought up, which is that the GOP is now a party, our base, our low propensity voters, right? The idea that they don't really care to vote in every single election. You got to kind of chase their ballots. You got to kind of push them to show up to vote. And historically, that was the Democrats, right? That's why the Democrats always put all these efforts into it. But we're seeing now, because of the sort of party switch or party realignment happening currently in America, Donald Trump sort of drove it. We're now starting to see it's the other way around. And the proof of that is undeniable, because we had a special election last night in Ohio that was pretty irrelevant, right? Nobody really cared about it. And obviously, Ohio nowadays, a Republican state. The county this election was in was heavily Republican. And yet the Democrat came pretty close there. I think they almost won, right? And what does that show? Some people are saying Trump is screwed in the election, but I think it more so shows actually the GOP now are just the low propensity, low energy voters. And so this is why it's important to chase after their ballots. And again, another reason we can't get complacent, because we need to make sure all these people in polls saying that they will vote for Donald Trump actually do vote for Donald Trump. There's also another poll that came out that showed something interesting here. It says the 2024 general election among respondents who also voted in 2018, 2020, and 2022, right? So this is talking to high propensity voters. This is people who normally are voting in elections, okay? So among people who voted in all 3 of the past elections, Biden leads Donald Trump 50-39. That's by 11 points. But from people who only voted once since 2018, Donald Trump leads there by 12 points, 45-33 over Biden. And for people who voted, check this out, in none of the past 3 elections, Donald Trump leads 44-26, a margin of 18 points over Joe Biden. And that's important here. Okay, so Charlie Kirk went out to say, do you notice a dramatic decrease in the public service announcements that are trying to get low propensity voters to register now versus 2020? And that's referring to, remember back to the 2020 election, Facebook was saying, hey, register to vote, all this stuff. And now it feels like that's almost non-existent. They're not trying to chase high turnout. Why is that? Because nowadays, in regards to the way it used to be, high turnout favors the Republicans, and you can see this here from these numbers. It's almost as if the regime knows less likely voters could swing this election towards Trump. Are they hoping for lower turnout? The answer is yes. The higher the turnout is this November, the better our chances are of winning. And again, that's a reason I say it should be illegal, folks. We cannot allow it to happen where we get complacent, because as you can see, as this poll showed, we have a lot of Republican votes to chase, because you can virtually guarantee that this Biden plus 11, because they voted in the last 3 elections, are going to vote in this one as well. However, someone who only voted once since 2018, are you so sure that they're going to show up to vote in this election? In fact, the chances are probably more likely that they're not, right? They might, but they're not. We got to do the work on the ground to make sure they turn out. And then again, this margin where Trump is leading by 18 among people where they voted in none of the past 3 elections, the chances are very high, even though they support Trump, they don't vote in this election either. So we need to do a lot of work to make sure these votes get in for Donald Trump. And it's ironic because all their talk about democracy, it seems to me based on these polls, if it is a high turnout Democratic election, Donald Trump actually wins this year. But with that said, we got to make sure it happens. We cannot get complacent. I will reiterate. With that said, folks, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. What do you think of the polling out of the state of Pennsylvania? Do you think PA will decide the election? And what do you think about this battle over low propensity voters and why the GOP struggles with that nowadays? That said, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, Alpha moves only. God bless. Have a very great rest of your day, and peace.